Joshua Green in the Boston Globe wrote a story, a hypothetical, about the filibuster, about what would have happened during the Obama presidency were there not to have been a filibuster at that time. And it's fascinating because, right now a simple majority doesn't win in the Senate. You have to have 60 votes to break the filibuster. And the Republicans have run obstruction at every turn, as they promised they would. It's not a surprise. They said we're going to be the party of no. But this is what the Obama presidency, this is what is being proffered by Joshua Green. The Obama presidency, had the filibuster not applied, the United States would have a market-based system to control carbon emissions, to limit damage from global warming, vitalize clean technology sector, and challenge other polluters like China and India to do the same. The new healthcare law would have had a public option. Children of undocumented immigrants who served 2 years in the military or went to college could become U.S. citizens. Women paid less than their male colleagues because of their gender would have broader legal recourse against their employers. Billionaires would not be able to manipulate the political system. One of the things I love about it is because of the taxes, Mitt Romney would be paying a higher tax rate right now of it saved him $1.48 million, the filibuster did, in 2010 alone. So all of these measures, Green is saying, had they all passed the House and they got a majority in the Senate, and had there not been a filibuster, they all would have been law.
So it's a really great article. It's very thoughtful, very interesting. And I love the 1.4 million that Mitt Romney says, because it really crystallizes why they care so much about the tax cuts. Because to us, it's theoretical, but to them, it's real. If the rate is X or it's Y, it makes millions of dollars of difference to a guy like Mitt Romney.
For sure.
So for his funders, it's sometimes tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars difference. So to them, it's a matter of like, my God, if some legislation they were going to pass would have affected you to the point where you either have $80 million more or less, wouldn't you go around bribing politicians? Of course you would, right? So I love that aspect of it. Now, I'm going to take issue with some of his claims, though. I think carbon emissions cap and trade was nowhere near passing the Senate. It wasn't a filibuster thing. So what I remember, it got crushed.
Well, all of these things got the 50 votes
all of them
necessary.
had the 50 votes.
In the Senate.
You might argue that some of those
votes were gratuitous.
And that if 51 needed to pass, then
I don't think it would have passed.
Then the effort from the industry would have been different. The lobbying would have been different, and the vote.
Right. And I would make that argument for a lot of things, like the millionaire tax and all that stuff. I don't think the Democrats were going to
there are probably some Democrats that vote
taxes
because they're under the 60-vote ceiling, and it's a safe vote.
But that said, also would change the whole world of politics, and what would be necessary would change. There's no way around it that it would make Obama more progressive because he was able to be more progressive. And if you believe Obama is at his heart not in any way progressive, I don't necessarily believe that. I just think that what he is practical first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and that's what he cares about most. That, hey, this would be practical. This would make sense. All of a sudden, winning something 56-44, that's a good win.
Yeah.
We can go around and shake hands.
So that's really interesting. So I agree with you that he's practical above everything else, right? But part of that involves making deals where you do not have the progressive position. So public option is the perfect example. He thought in order to get this passed, the most important thing is not X number of senators or X number of congressmen. It's making sure the industry, stakeholders, as they call them, were on board. Otherwise, they were going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in ads, and they were going to defeat it, and et cetera, et cetera. In order to get a lot of those guys on board, he said, I'm going to kill the public option. Right. That's what the reporting seems to indicate. Right. That's what I believe.
That's one of the things that happened. That did happen. There are other factors at stake, I think, with why the public option
And also
didn't
that did help it to pass in the House as well. And it may not have passed the House otherwise.
What we saw with, let's just randomly take a totally different case and take Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. Look what the public pressure did there, right? It forced the feds to get involved, which eventually led to an independent state prosecutor, and it led to charges being filed. Now it's in the hands as it should be, and we'll see. Maybe he gets acquitted, maybe not. But it pressured it. If there's no filibuster, then even if Obama wants to make that deal for no public option, the industry that wants there to be no public option, they have to fight it differently. Because all of a sudden, there could significantly be a groundswell. There'd still be that groundswell of progressive support for it, and the pressure would have been very real, and we might well have it, maybe a watered-down version, but something.
Well, so that's why public option is the perfect example, because they always said, we can't do it, we don't have 60 votes, 60 votes is too hard. But in reality, they actually passed a significant portion of health care through reconciliation. So they only needed 50 votes. They could have done it. And when push came to shove, the guys who said, well, if it was at 50, we could do it, didn't do it.
But again, it's
because money is more
reconciliation
important.
is different
Well,
than going to the full Senate.
Let me just say one last quick thing about that. And then in the Trayvon Zimmerman case, public pressure made an enormous difference. You were absolutely right about that. But remember, there's no money on the other side.
I'm not.
Do you see what I'm saying? Public pressure matters a lot when there's no money involved.
You would have had a much
when
tougher.
there is, it's a different equation.
I understand, but it the difference between 50 and 60 isn't the difference between isn't 10. It's enormous. It's a huge percentage because 60 is almost impossible. 50 can be done. So there really could have been that same campaign that made us all optimistic very briefly that there might be a public option. That would have happened. It would have happened longer, and it would have changed the dynamics for everybody. It wouldn't throw money out, but it would. That playing field evens, and who knows at that point.
So not every one of those priorities that Joshua lays out would have passed because the reality is the Democrats are faking some of their support because they get money from the same guys. But would some of them have passed? Of course. You're right.
I would
public
think
pressure.
many of them would. And one of the ones that we didn't mention in our conversation, or some of them, are judges. You know, the judges and vacancies that were there. Not just that. The Federal Reserve would have operated with a full slate of governors, including Peter Diamond. Elizabeth Warren would be director of the Consumer Financial.
Again, that's one I'm going to exempt because I think that there was no way Elizabeth Warren, you could have needed 12 senators and she wouldn't have gotten confirmed because President Obama wouldn't have offered her because President Obama works with the banks and wants the banks to be happy, and the banks told him under no circumstances.
I don't believe that.
I agree with Michael because I don't know what I agree with Michael is that I don't know what would have happened, and you might be right, but the whole dynamic changes because the way they have this. Not only do they have the money, they got this 60 vote thing that gives them the power to push around with their money.
Look, of course I grant you guys that you're making good points, and those are fair, and we don't, of course, really. But Elizabeth Warren, come to think of it, is actually another great example because the person who was nominated after her also wasn't put forward through the Senate because the Republicans said we're going to block everything. So he wound up doing a recess appointment. It needs 0 senators. He could have done a recess appointment for Elizabeth Warren. He wasn't going to appoint her. He just wasn't.
And to be clear, the judge, well, yes, although I think he thinks he would have been able to get Cordray in without the recess appointment. I think he was disappointed that he wasn't able to do that. But also just one other thing about this, the judges, just to be clear, the judges and Elizabeth Warren and these appointments were only in the Senate. The House did not have to approve their
And also, but then, so let's take that point then. If you think he wouldn't have appointed Elizabeth Warren anyway, well then he's got to come up with whole new, different, fake reasons for it.
That's true.
So
that's true.
And so maybe,
but in some ways, that pushes him further to the right because
maybe
then he's got to justify it.
Whatever it is, it pushes him and everybody more toward honesty and openness. So if he doesn't want to appoint Elizabeth Warren, then it's going to become pretty obvious why he didn't want to appoint her. He can't hide behind this. Maybe he doesn't, but either way, we learn more.
Right. No, that's fair. And look, I would love it if there wasn't a filibuster obstructing things in this Congress. But you know what? The last point in this conversation is now all of a sudden, not just Harry Reid, but Sheldon Whitehouse and a lot of Democratic senators coming out and saying, yeah, we should do filibuster reform. And that makes my head hurt because now the Republicans have stand a pretty good chance of winning the Senate and honestly of winning the presidency. All of a sudden, the Democrats are
the only
going to do
reason to have
reform?
it is for defense. And now, as soon as we're going to be having to play defense, the Democrats are saying, yeah, we don't need a defense.
No, it's unbelievable. That's why, look, I don't know if it's true, but that's why you say things like they're trying to lose. It looks like if you were going to try to lose, this is what you would do.
If you spent a lot of time on the show, Cenk, talking about what was inevitable. Look, I think filibuster reform seems inevitable because it's crazy. It makes no sense ultimately, and I don't know whether it happens in 2 years or 25 years. But I think it'll happen, and it's pretty obvious who will be the minority when it happens.
That's it.
Right.
But Ben nailed it because that gives you an insight into our politics, which is that you know that if somebody's going to take away the filibuster, it's going to be the Republicans or the Democrats right before the Republicans come in. And when the Republicans are in charge, they're going to get rid of it. And we're going to march on forward. So why do we have a system where we know that the Democrats are very likely to lose and the Republicans are likely to win?
But if you agree that the country is ultimately progressive, I think in the long run, short term, it'll be disastrous for the Democrats. Long run, it'll help.
Only if you get money out of politics, because because money beats public. So far it has.
Right, but
it
money,
has for the last
but now,
30, 40.
but now money
No,
beats,
not always.
I think always. Now
money,
today, I think always.
Oh, today always,
yeah.
yes. But that's why I always think, like, not only do I mention the polls when I say the country is fundamentally progressive, and on issue by issue we win 90% of the polls overwhelmingly, but I also, always go back to the 1930s to the 70s, a giant chunk of the golden era. What the conservatives say is the golden era of America, where when there wasn't nearly as much money pressure in politics, when corporations couldn't give unlimited money, et cetera, then the country passed every progressive law you could imagine. And that's when the country was massively progressive.
Look, your point about politics and getting money out of politics is indisputable. But now you have money in politics, and they got this other thing that enables the politicians to hide behind the fact that it's not money. And you remove it, it's a blow to money in politics. It doesn't even the playing field, but it's a blow.
It is definitely a blow. That's true.
Corporate
That's a good
America
point.
does not want to lose the filibuster.